Now we move on to our next news. Portugal's parliament has approved a controversial bill introduced by the far-right Chega party to ban face veils worn for gender or religious motives in most public spaces. The legislation specifically targets burqas and niqabs worn by some Muslim women and includes penalties ranging from $210 to $4,250. Forcing someone to wear a face veil could carry prison sentences of up to 3 years. Exceptions to the ban include airplanes, diplomatic premises, and places of worship. The bill has now advanced to a parliamentary committee on constitutional affairs, rights, freedoms, as well as guarantees for further review. President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa retains the authority to veto this legislation or refer it to the Constitutional Court for a constitutional review. The move brings Portugal in line with several European countries like France, Austria, Belgium, and the Netherlands that have enacted similar full or partial bans on face coverings. Chega, a party previously criticized for promoting Islamophobic and anti-feminist rhetoric, claims the measures defends women's rights and national identity. Party leader Andre Ventura has described the law as a step towards protecting women from being forced to wear veils, a claim challenged by opposition lawmakers. Left-wing parties strongly opposed the bill, warning it could fuel discrimination and stigmatize Muslim communities. Two smaller parties abstained, citing similar concerns. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Dr. Asta Chada. She's a doctor at Rydzomykan University, joins us live from Warsaw. Thank you very much, Dr. Chada, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking back at this news, to what extent does Portugal's face veil ban reflect broader trends in Europe toward secularization as well as cultural assimilation? And how might this impact Muslim communities in those countries?
Thank you for having me here on this very, very pertinent discussion. I mean, in fact, sitting here from Warsaw, I mean, Poland is one of those countries that hasn't had yet a debate on that topic. It seems quite surprising that Portugal had to come out with this discussion at all. I mean, although it's not yet a law, it is a bill. But the very fact that they are pushing it as something intended for women's security once again brings to the fore the kind of discussions we've seen, ever since 9/11 regarding protecting women or making sure that women are saved from any form of coercion. So the arguments from the center-right have been largely that they are going to punish people who coerce or force women to wear a veil, or they're going to promote some form of integration, which they intend or they imply that through their words, which in some way has been an obstacle in the past. Now, reading between the lines, I mean, of course, the bill in itself does not state clearly who this is intended against, but it's very obvious that certain religious communities, they might have that as part of their tradition to wear certain kinds of veils, right? So even though the headscarf in itself is not named, what they are intending to restrict is anything that covers the face. Now, is that a blanket ban? Well, if you read the bill, it basically says there are specific spaces that are excluded from this. So airplanes, any diplomatic premises, consulates, places of worship won't be part of it. Or there could be exceptions made for health, professional, artistic, entertainment, so on and so forth. However, the very fact that this is intended in some way to protect women is in itself a big question mark, because if you look at the Muslim population in Portugal, it's not too big. It's less than 0.5% according to their own census back in 2021. So that's one issue that obviously brings this whole bill into question. And the second aspect is that of national security. Now, Europe is not alone in banning any sort of face veils. You see, there are certain Muslim countries as well that have banned it in the recent past, and two of those that come top of my head are Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, again citing national security and aiming for greater reintegration or a move towards secularization. again, one would question, whether this is really about a security measure to ensure that police work or any sort of intelligence or information gathering becomes easier, or is this about further fueling divisions between religious and cultural communities that are intended to somehow have integrated well into the Western societies or into the Central Asian societies, which is something that they see has not happened. And thirdly, again, anytime there is a certain law or a certain bill or a discussion that tries to in some way side or other a certain community, there is a question on freedom of religion. So if this were to take effect, like it has in France, Belgium, Austria, or other similar countries, one would once again question whether this bill is intended in some way to promote freedom of religion, wherein women are given an equal stature as men, or this is some sort of a disproportionate response, because again, how many women who are veiled do pose a serious security threat, right? And to what
Yes.
extent should the state interfere when it comes
Yes.
to the idea of freedom of religion or protecting somebody's freedom of religion?
Yes, Dr. Asta, absolutely. There's a lot of question mark, especially when they say this is protecting women's rights or national identity. In case this bill proceeds or passes without a presidential veto or constitutional challenge, what legal and social precedents could this set for future legislation targeting religious or minority practices in Portugal? As you've also mentioned that there's only 0.5% Muslims in Portugal according to the latest census, and even in that, maybe only few, because many Muslim people that even I know, not all of them wear this veil, right?
Absolutely. I mean, see, again, if this were to become a law of some sort, this wouldn't be the first time this is happening. We've seen a wave of such sort of restrictions being imposed in one way or another by several countries, and again, not limited to the West. We've seen that happen in Central Asia as well, and the kind of arguments that they give are ranging from uplifting women or protecting women's rights to some sort of social cohesion, right? Now, the implications are obviously going to be quite dire, because remember, we are talking not just about some sort of a security risk that a certain individual might or might not pose to the state. This is about state exercising control over women's bodies in a way. And any such law, whether it is covering the face or restricting a certain kind of clothing, or it's about a certain sort of an abortion ban, all of these in some way intend to restrict what women can or cannot do, right? And the state takes up in most of these cases. If you read through most of these laws and most of these bills, they in a way speak to each other in a very small vacuum. So they seem to be in some way preventing anti-extremism without taking into account how many of those, let's say, activities or extremist activities do take place in proportion to the wider population. So this has been, which is why you see, at least in Portugal, the parties on the left, even some in the center, some that abstained, but specifically the ones on the left critiqued it, and they were criticizing it mainly for not addressing the core security issues, if there are any, in Portugal. And given the fact that, at least in Portugal's case, Muslim population is fairly low, and amongst those, as you mentioned, maybe not all of them are actually practicing a certain form of clothing or a certain form of headscarf or a certain form of niqab, right? So what exactly is this intended to ban? What exactly this is intended to prevent, it remains quite unclear.
100%. Thank you very much, Dr. Asta Chada, for joining us and sharing that insight all the way from Warsaw. Now we move on to our next news. According to reports, a tunnel has been discovered by the officers of the Podlaski border guards. The discovered tunnel is said to be around 20 meters long, connecting Belarus and Poland. This is the second tunnel found this year, with the first near Narevka. On Thursday alone, more than 60 illegal crossing attempts were recorded, with over 26,700 since January 2025. Now, Poland had accused Belarus of using migrants to destabilize the region, insinuating the role of tunnels for entry in Poland. With Belarus being an ally of Russia, the second tunnel discovery raises serious security concerns for Poland as the Russia-Ukraine war continues.